Hello, this is Ivana.
This is Yao.
And you're listening to the podcast Life in Black and White.
And all the shades in between.
We share all things life, relationships, marriage, parenting, race, and much more. If you enjoy listening to us, then please follow or subscribe to this podcast. You can also find us on Instagram and Facebook under Life in Black and White. Hello, and welcome back. Before I start, I want to say that we changed the frequency of releasing new episodes. I think we were a bit naive when we thought we could manage every week at this point anyway. So we're going to release a new episode every 2 weeks for now. And then over time, we go back to once a week. Today's episode title is How to Raise a Kind Child in a Prejudiced World. And it's been inspired by the book that was written by my amazing friend, Uju Asika. And if you haven't read that yet, I highly recommend it to every parent, or not even parents. I mean, not only parents, to everyone, every human, because it's just, it's amazing. It's such an amazing book. And it offers so many insights into the life as a Black person and the unconscious bias that most of us are not aware of or don't understand. And it just helps, just to be aware of certain things, make all the difference. It's going to be just me today because I feel I have a lot to share on this subject from my perspective. I believe that many people, when they hear or see the term prejudiced world, they immediately go, oh, the world is not prejudiced, yeah? And I promise you, I used to be exactly the same. I believed, or I think I was a bit naive in that respect, because I really thought that most people were just, they had no bias, no prejudice, and I thought I was one of them. But to be completely honest with you, after marrying Yao, it took me years, but I understood that I am so biased myself. And it's not a bad, it's not a great thing, of course, but it's just something we grew up with, and it's wired in us, in our subconscious, I believe, for many of us. And I see that now whenever I go, for instance, back home, or I talk to people who are not involved in the Black world, I can see they are not aware of their own bias. And I think it's sad. Is it sad? It is sad, yeah, because then not being aware of the reality, how can we change it, yeah? How can we make a difference if we don't acknowledge what is? And back home, for instance, we don't really have many Black people, but we have a certain entity that, there is a lot of, dislike against, and it's just, I don't want to go too deep into that, but I never ever would have thought that I'm biased, but now I understand, and it took me years, like I said, to understand that I am. Yeah, and the past me used to think that in order to have bias, you need to, publicly admit that you don't like certain race or certain entity, or call people names and stuff like that. But now I understand this actually is not bias or racism at all. This is just people being stupid. Or it can be a part of racism or bias, but it's not the main thing. This is not the problem, yeah. It's the unconscious bias or something that is hidden and we are not even aware of that's dangerous, yeah. Like, let's say you're a hiring manager, yeah, and you have, in front of you have a CV of two people who are highly qualified. One of them has a white name, quote unquote, and the other has non-white name, yeah. And you, without even thinking or realizing it, you're unconsciously more inclined to go for the quote-unquote white name person, or you're more inclined to call them to come for an interview, yeah? Or, like, for instance, myself, when I admitted to myself that I had bias, it was moments like I didn't even notice before or didn't give them second thought, but I started noticing them all of a sudden, yeah? So for instance, like I said, we have a certain entity back home that there is a lot of hate going on and stuff. But I always say that it's not about them, it's about how you grow up, how you're growing up. Because if you are born into poverty or, certain lifestyle, then you don't know any difference. So of course you grow up being the same. So it's not about them as people, it's about how they grow up, what they are surrounded by. And I would always speak about them highly and never engaged in any conversations that were full of hate or prejudice against them. So I thought I'm a great person because I'm not slightly biased, yeah? But then I started noticing this bias in myself. For instance, like I was on the plane and these people of this entity I was sitting in my seat, and these people a group of these people would walk down the aisle, and they would come closer to me. And in my mind, I thought, oh my God, I hope they don't sit next to me. Yeah. And it really freaked me out at first, like, oh my God, this is what it is about. Yeah. And I had that probably my whole life, all these small, unconscious thoughts that crossed my mind without me even realizing I had them. But it freaked me out, yeah. Or I heard at the airport, I would heard a very, very loud group, or I would hear a fight, yeah, very loud swearing words, a fight, and in my mind, it was like a knee-jerk reaction, like, oh, that must be at that entity group, stuff. So, and this is what it really is about and what's dangerous. Yeah, and we could go on forever, but this is just a few examples of how it really, really works. Or I had a conversation back home with people, and I would talk to them about this because I'm trying to raise awareness, and I know it won't happen overnight. It's a process because it took me years as well. So I don't expect anyone to understand this overnight. But I would be engaged in a conversation and people would try and convince me, no, I'm not biased. It always depends how a certain people or a certain person acts, how they behave. Because if they behave good, or nice, then I have nothing against them. Yeah, it's just, and if someone is rude or naughty, then that's the people I don't like. So it's not based on the color of the skin or the entity. It's about how they behave, yeah? But then, a few hours later, yeah, for instance, we're sitting outside, someone have a coffee, and I get up to go toilet, and that person says, oh, don't leave your wallet. Don't leave your wallet on the table because such and such are here, yeah? So just, they didn't even realize what they said. They negated everything they had said 10 minutes before or an hour before, it doesn't matter, yeah? So they would try and convince me, no, I'm not biased, but then, oh, don't leave your stuff here because they steal, they're here, so of course they'll steal, yeah? And that's what it is, yeah? So if we want to raise a kind child in this world, first of all, we need to acknowledge this. Because it's very difficult for me as a mom of mixed-race children, knowing that the time will come. They're small now, but the time will come when they come home and they say, Mommy, what is an N-word, yeah? Or like the other day, Henry did ask me, why some people kill black people just because they don't like their skin, yeah, and stuff like that. And in the past, I would probably be like, oh, just don't be paranoid. Yeah, it doesn't happen and it's nothing. It's not a real thing now. But that's the thing, that it is a real thing. Yeah. And in terms of Black people, there's so much history to it. Yeah, we don't know, and I don't know the full history, of course. If you watched Meghan and Harry's document, it was very nicely described there. So I recommend you watch it. And lots of white people would say, "Oh, she was just paranoid and she imagined it," and that's the dangerous bit, that not being aware that it is real. Yeah. So when my kids ask me these questions, it just brings me back to reality. Always like, okay, this is what we have to face, and this is going to be difficult. We just need to make sure that we raise them to be confident people who are proud of who they are. This is what we can do. This is the best thing you can do. Because if we dismiss that or refuse to see the reality, then how would that help anyone, yeah? And even parents of white parents of white kids, they need to be aware of this. There's no other way around it, yeah? And we'll try on this podcast, we don't want to go too aggressive into this subject, but hopefully, if you listen to us regularly, you'll be aware of the reality as well, a bit more, yeah? And you understand what it's like. And another thing that some people don't understand is when I say that my husband he had a hard time growing up as a Black person, yeah? And what I get often back is, but he grew up in London. It's full of different races and nationalities. How could it's like he didn't stand out there? Yeah, this shows how bad the awareness is about the reality of racism and bias. Yeah, and it took me a while to admit that to myself, that I have bias myself. It's just something that we grew up with. Yeah, it's wired in us. What I can do now is to try and change that, to change the world by speaking up, by sharing the truth. And being aware of that is the first step. It's the first step, and acknowledging that it is real, yeah. That we all have bias, and it's not a bad thing as such, because it's not our fault. Probably the reason why many people don't want to admit they are biased is because they connected with something negative. They feel like they would be bad people if they were biased. But in most cases, it's not your fault. It's not your fault. It's how you were raised, what you listened to, what your parents were saying to you, and it's so many little pieces of puzzle that build this picture. Small pieces that you can't even remember, but they're there, and they build those bias in you without you even realizing, yeah? So maybe your current adult self knows that, or doesn't want to be biased. You love everyone the same, or you accept everyone the same, but something in you is wired differently, yeah? For most of us, I'm not saying everyone on this planet, of course, but most of us, yeah, in one way or another. So if you really want to change this, we can start with our kids, of course, yeah? We start with our kids, and we help them understand the reality of the world, and be careful what we tell them, how we raise them, how we talk to them about different races. Some people might say that, or they do say that, oh, I don't care if you're brown, purple, blue, or whatever, you're equal, yeah? But the problem with this approach is that you're completely dismissing the reality, yeah? If you are Black, or if you're Black, you're white, you're Asian, you all went through something completely different. You have different history. Of course, you are the same people on some level, but on the other level you're not. Yeah, and it's very, very important to acknowledge your background and the other people's backgrounds as well, because dismissing your background by saying, oh, I don't care what you are, you're the same, that doesn't help. Yeah, so acknowledging and being aware of their background is crucial. Yeah, so if you, for instance, you have white children and they have a black friend or mixed race friend, it's important to talk to your kids about the differences and maybe the history, the situation, what it's like, what it was like, why is that different? Not worse or better, just different. Sharing the knowledge and awareness, it's absolute. We also need to be more conscious about what we or how we speak about race and diversity, because everything we say just adds, it's like the small piece of puzzle that can add. For instance, even if we say jokes that are against certain ethnicity or race, even though you see them as jokes, as harmless jokes, they are not, because you never know who hears it or how it can, impact someone else, what it can create in their subconscious. And, it's like every say joke you say, it's another small piece of puzzle that adds to the big picture of unconscious bias. So we need to be very, very conscious about what we say and how we say it. And whenever we catch ourselves wanting to say something that could potentially be another small piece of the puzzle, we just stop. We just stop there. And it may feel or it may seem insignificant, but I promise you it's this. If we all do this, the impact it will have is massive. And then, of course, it's all about teaching our kids to be kind, about kindness, to be kind to each other. Yeah. Because if you have a child who is not kind to another child, it's in most cases it's because it's what they learned at home, what they see at home. So we need to start with ourselves. Yeah, we need to give the kindness to ourselves first, because if we are not kind to our kids or to other people, it's because we are not kind to ourselves in the first place. Yeah, so kindness is essential. It's absolute essential. And if you want to change the world, then you start within, as Michael Jackson said. If you want to make the world a better place, take a look at yourself and make a change. And that's that. Yeah. Of course, this is a subject we could talk about for ages. And I'm sure we'll come back to it at some point. But for now, I'll leave you with that. And I hope this was helpful in any way. Thank you so much for listening. And I'll see you in 2 weeks.